Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So today I'm going to be spraying my boxwoods and other small evergreens with Wilt Stop. I've done this for the past 2 years in a row and it has greatly helped with winter dieback. So in my area specifically, we can have an issue where the temperature drops really quickly and it's a really hard freeze early in the season. We haven't experienced that this year, but I do want to spray this to prevent as much moisture loss as possible, just in case we have a drier season than usual. So evergreens can be something difficult to plant in winter because they still photosynthesize throughout winter since they keep their leaves. And because of that, they need continual moisture, else they will dry out really bad and die. So for the past 2 years, I have used Wilt Stop. This is created by Bonide. It is essentially an organic product made of pine resin. That is solely the only ingredient. Because of that, it is extremely sticky. So you want to pick a sprayer that you don't care a whole lot about. So I have one from Harbor Freight that was like $10. I spray some organic fungicides and stuff in that throughout the season. And when you're done spraying this, you need to make sure you run some Dawn or some detergent and some water through it and spray it for a good amount of time to get that all out of there. Ask me how I know. This is not something you can leave in your sprayer and use it as you need it. It's something that's a one-time use. When you mix it up, you need to use all of it and dispose of it, else the sprayer's not going to be any good anymore because it is super sticky. So when I was looking on the directions of this morning, it was quite interesting. So this stuff can also be used for like evergreens, for your Christmas tree if you have a natural Christmas tree in your house, or decorations like spruce and things you may cut clippings of to hang around your garden or inside your house. You can spray this stuff with it. Like I said, it does make it really sticky, but it makes it last a really long time because it coats the leaves and prevents that moisture loss. But there was also some additional interesting uses in the directions. You can use it on house plants. You can actually dip bulbs in it for storage, which I have never seen done and I have never tried. It might be something I could try on a few dahlias this year, because I do have trouble with my dahlias desiccating over winter. So at the end of this video, I am going to be digging my dahlias and I will show you a little bit of the storage process with that. I don't want to give you a how-to because I haven't been very successful in storing dahlias yet, but I'm just going to show you how I deal with that over winter. Wilt Stop can also be used to stop salt damage from things next to the road. If you get really heavy snows and your county salts the roads. Cut flowers and summer scald. So it just essentially just coats those leaves and prevents moisture loss or evaporation from those leaves and prevents as much damage as possible to those. So one thing it does say is to spray it in the fall before the temperatures freeze. So you don't want this freezing on the plants. It needs to dry on the plants and then it will help prevent that damage more. So the reason I am spraying this is because the boxwoods that you've probably seen around my maple, I have right here next to me, those were originally around my vegetable garden where I have the sprinter boxwoods now. The first year those were in the ground and they were planted early in the season, probably March or April, they suffered severe dieback when we had a winter freeze at the very beginning of November. And since then, I've looked at efforts of preventing that on my boxwoods. In fact, they were so bad that I actually removed those boxwoods from the area, replaced them with sprinters, and gave them a whole season in a container to recover. And they're still super small. So this has been my method of basically protecting my boxwoods over winter. So the things I'm going to be applying this to are all of the boxwoods in my garden. I apply it to every boxwood. I'm going to be applying it to the small tater tot 𝗟𝗶𝗲𝗏 that I have below me here, and the green giant 𝗟𝗏𝗏𝗏 that is directly behind me that I dug up and transplanted from where the gate fence is. Anything else in my garden, you can certainly spray it on any of your evergreens that you would like, but these are my priorities to get done this morning. So I'm gonna go mix this up and show you how it's done. So I have one of these hoses that I keep during winter. I put all my good hoses up, but this is just one of those 0G hoses that I use. If it's already cold, I can hook it up quickly. It's really short, and I can fill things up with it as needed. So this is a 1.25 gallon sprayer. It came from Harbor Freight and I think I paid $10 for it or so. Not a whole lot. So the directions say to make 1 gallon, you fill the gallon container and then you add 21 fluid ounces of Wilt Stop. So I have my little plastic measuring cups that I like to reuse. These are by Prep Store. I'll put a link below. And you may want to use gloves with this. It is organic and it is pure pine resin, so the only thing it's going to do to you is make your hands super sticky if you get it on you. So you just want to be careful of that. Otherwise, it's not going to harm you. So these are 8 ounces, so I need to put almost 3 of these. And you can see it's just this white substance, almost like if you were to cut a evergreen or a pine, you would get this white sap, and that's all this is. It even smells like pine. So if you are just doing a few things, you obviously don't need to mix a whole gallon of this. My first year I actually just sprayed a small handheld sprayer that I picked up from Sam's Club, just a bottle sprayer, and that's how I know that you need to use something that is cheap and then you don't mind ruining, because it clogged up the sprayer because I left it in there not thinking about it and it never worked again. So definitely use something cheap, or that you want to clean out really good. And that's it. I'm hoping I can use this entire gallon to cover everything in my garden, because you don't want to spray a ton of it. You do want to coat the leaves to protect them from water loss, but you also don't want to just like oversaturate it too much. So I'm hoping I can get everything in my garden sprayed. If I need to mix up a little more, I have some left. I don't have a whole lot left in here, but I'll use as much as I have available. If I need to get more, I'll order some more and continue spraying. So we're gonna get started, and I'm gonna do this quickly because apparently when you buy a cheap sprayer from Harbor Freight, it starts coming undone. So let me release some of the pressure from this. That's really annoying. So you basically want to coat these as much as you can. You're not super concerned about doing them to run off. I'm just trying to not let my sprayer spray everywhere. Apparently it doesn't leak as bad if I just have it sitting on the ground. So I'm going to spray this. You can see that it creates this white milky substance on the plant. And that's all I want to do, is cover this really well. I'm going to spray all of my small stuff first, and if I don't have enough of this, the bigger boxwoods will likely be okay. And especially since they're acclimating more now to the temperature, and we haven't had one of those days where the temperature dropped really severely. So I just want to make sure I get all of the tiny stuff covered. These tater tot arborvitae, since I planted them, have actually grown quite a bit. They were way smaller when I planted them. So it helps if you can pressurize your tank a little better than I'm able to, because this sprung a leak, because it certainly comes out faster, but you get the idea. These are the brass buckle ilex, and so they are also evergreens, and because they were just planted, I want to make sure those are covered as well. So I transitioned to my handheld solo sprayer that I really like. It does a really fine mist, and I can't say that I would recommend a Harbor Freight sprayer. That's only been used once, and it broke on me, so I could probably return it. I obviously don't have the receipt, but this solo sprayer is definitely my preferred for applications like this, because it just produces a really fine mist. One thing I would be really cognizant about is be sure you spray any boxwoods in containers, because over winter those may not get as much moisture, and that's certainly something you want to protect. And these boxwoods, even though I put them in a few weeks ago, with the cooler temperatures, they put on quite a bit of growth, and so this new growth is really fragile going into winter with freeze damage. So that's another reason I'm spraying these. One thing I really love about this solo sprayer, which I know I've used on my channel before and showed you, I love that the head changes and can be moved almost completely around so that you can spray even if stuff is in the way. So if I needed to get back here, I could twist the head down, back towards me more, and just spray and get those areas. Makes it super simple. So we just transplanted this 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 from down where the gate is, so we could walk through the gate easier. Maybe a little crooked. It will of course straighten itself over the years, but because it was only done a few weeks ago, and we did get some rain for nearly a whole week a couple weeks ago, I just want to make sure I can lock in as much moisture as I can for this over winter. So hopefully it will transplant really successfully since it had so much rain, and I won't have any issues with die-off over winter. I've had really good luck with the green giants. I did have some die-off a couple winters ago that I completely trimmed back or cut out, and they've recovered really well. I think that was once again because of our really hard freeze we had, and it was a lot of new growth as the weather had cooled off, and it didn't survive well when the temperatures dropped rather quickly. You'll find that a lot for a lot of evergreens, that they struggle that way. But since I've trimmed out those dead parts, they've recovered really well. And they're really thickening up this year, and next year I expect that a lot of them will make an entire hedge. These are probably at least 12 foot tall already. And if you haven't seen my video on my green giants, I will link it below, because these are only about 3.5 years old. And they were 12 inches when we planted them 3.5 years ago. So the 3 to 5 feet that they estimate these growing, I think is really honestly the truth, because I've got almost 5 foot out of them every year that I've planted them. They are on drip irrigation, so they do get consistent moisture, and I think that's important for the growth rate. After they form a hedge, I will probably cut off on the drip irrigation, simply because I don't want them continuing that pace. I want them to slow down a little bit, and I did plant them closer together so they won't get as large as they normally would if planted as a single specimen. Alright, with what I have left, I'm going to finish the few boxwoods I have in front of the front porch, and then I'm going to clean this out really good, and then we'll get to digging the dahlias. So stay tuned. Alright everyone, I got all of the evergreens treated with wilt stop, so I know going into winter that if I have any dieback, I did the best I could to prevent that. I haven't had a whole lot of issues with that, like I mentioned, but this is just a preventative because I have suffered severe dieback in the past. So it's not something you're required to do. Wilt stop isn't that expensive, and if you have the time going into fall, it's something that I might recommend, and if you live in a zone where we can have pretty harsh winters. So I'm going to clip back and dig my dahlias today. I did not have the best dahlia year, so I'm not going to say that I'm a dahlia expert. I am moving these up front to my vegetable garden next year, and I'm going to space them out a little more just so I can keep a better eye on them. I have heard on other YouTubers' pages that they didn't have the best dahlia year either, so I don't think this was just my issue. So I'm going to go through and clip these back. We had our first hard frost, and the stems are really mushy, so I'm going to just trim those off. So last year I stored my dahlias in like a milk crate with a bag in it, a breathable bag, and vermiculite. I did like the vermiculite method, so I'm going to be continuing that this year, but I think I'm going to put them in a solid crate. The reason being is I'm not terribly concerned about a fungus issue and a lack of airflow. I treat my dahlias when I dig them with Captan, which is a powdered fungicide that I just kind of sift over the tubers before I put them in the vermiculite, and it helps control a lot of fungus issues. What I'm most concerned about is desiccation and the tubers drying up. I had a severe issue last year with that problem. I didn't go into winter having the best dahlia tubers. If you watch my dahlia video when I planted these, you know that I planted all of my dahlias the year before in the ground, and because of our heavy clay soil, I had probably 90% of them rotted. The ones that did survive looked really rough when I dug them up, and they never survived over winter. When I planted them, nothing come up. So I'm less concerned about fungus and more concerned about desiccation and drying out. So to combat that, I'm just going to put them in a regular container that I may drill a few holes in the side just so there can be some breathability. But also I have a lot more tubers here that I need to store, and so keeping them in one location is certainly easier. I will probably store these in the garage like I did last year. My basement stays too warm for them, and I can put them in the corner of a garage. We have an insulated garage door, so although we can't have really harsh winters, they should be fine up in the corner tucked near the house. And so I'm going to finish cutting off these stems, tearing them down, and then when I finish that, I'll show you what I'm doing as far as labeling. So I have these tags, which I've had someone ask me just the other day where these came from. I believe you can purchase similar tags from gardenersupply.com, but in the spring, Target typically has a variety of these, and so what I do is I buy all of them. A couple years ago, I bought all of them at our local Target, and I have a label maker, and I just print the name on them. These hold up really, really well, so what I'm doing this year is I'm going to pull the dahlia tubers up, and I'm actually just going to tie this label to them. So this one is Senior's Hope. I'm not sure I ever got a bloom out of this one, which is disappointing. It could be because this tree blocks some of its light, and that's one of the reasons I'm moving them up closer to the vegetable garden where I can spread them out a little more and just fertilize them. They're in view more, and I'll take better care of them. Hopefully, because I won't have as many projects going on next year. I don't plan to at this time. So these labels are nice just because they have the little loop at the top. So I'm just going to cut some string here, and in the spring I will cut this string off when I plant them and tie the tuber to the tag just like this. So as I mentioned, I had an issue with desiccation. You can wash these tubers off, although I have read that if you do so, it could lead to more issues with desiccation. So I am actually going to store them with a little dirt on them. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And it's not like this is raised bed mix when I put it in here, so it's not like super wet compost mix, and I still will put that cap tan on there. Alright everyone, I got my dahlia tubers dug. They're going to spend a couple days in the garage to dry out a little more, and then I'm going to bring them in the basement in my seed starting area where I have a sink and clean them off a little more, dust some of the dirt off. I'm not going to spray them off unless they have a lot of dirt on them, and then I'm going to pack them for winter in vermiculite and dust them beforehand with the cap tan that I mentioned. So I wanted to mention a little bit about the dahlia tubers I purchased this past year. I purchased both clumps, which have multiple tubers, and then single tubers. You'll find that a lot of dahlia growers are now sending single tubers as an option. So just be cognizant of when you're purchasing dahlia tubers online of whether they're clumps versus single tubers. I'm not sure after this year if I will be purchasing single tubers again. All of the single tubers I purchased, although the website that I purchased them from said they would produce beautiful blooms for me and form nice, really large clumps the first year, not one of the single tubers that I purchased did that. So I was a bit disappointed overall in my dahlia project this year. The blooms that I did get were really gorgeous, but most of those blooms came from clumps that I had purchased from whole clumps instead of the single tubers. So next year, if these tubers store well, I'm going to spread them out a little more in my vegetable garden, and hopefully they'll have a little more room and I can provide them a little more attention to give better blooms. I also may consider potting them up a little early and getting them a head start This year we didn't hardly get any blooms until late September into October on some of the varieties that I specifically wanted to see. And by that time we were approaching our frost and we just didn't have very many blooms from them. So I was hoping to get blooms earlier from a lot of my dahlias, and that didn't happen. So like I mentioned, this was all an experiment for me this year. I didn't have a great dahlia year last year because of the clay soil issues. This year I had some beautiful blooms, but not as prolific as I expected that I would have. And next year I don't think I'm going to purchase any new varieties. We will see when it gets into winter, and you know we all get that itch to buy seeds and flowers over winter. I'm going to try and contain myself a little bit this year and only purchase seeds I need, because I've been one of those people that have purchased a lot of stuff. And I have a ton of seeds that I haven't even used yet, specifically flower seeds that I will try and maybe start this next spring that I can plant out in the flower garden. I dug up my caladiums, which were one of the last things I needed to pick up as well. Caladiums are not hardy in my zone, and so what I'm going to do with those is let those also dry out in the garage a few days, and then I'm going to bring them inside, and I may actually try and pot those up as houseplants. We have a very dry house in winter. We do have a whole home humidifier, but I've heard that the caladiums like a lot of humidity and they don't necessarily do well as houseplants. So that'll be a little experiment, and if I don't get to that, I will just plant them out next year after our last frost, and they should pick up and do fine. They're kind of like elephant ears in our zone. You can't reliably plant elephant ears because there's not really any. There may be one variety that's hardy in our zone, and if we have a hard, really bad winter, those just won't return. The garden is getting ready to go to bed for winter. We've had several cold, hard frosts, and there's not much in the garden right now that's in bloom. The petunias that you see next to me is probably one of the only things remaining that is in bloom, and I haven't removed them yet just because it's the last fleeting blooms of summer, and I wanted to keep those around as long as I could. Those will probably be removed next weekend, but right now, as long as there's a little color in the garden, I'm happy with it. So this past week on Monday or Tuesday, I did go out and clean out and drain the fountains and let them dry out for several days before I put covers on them. The one in the front has a particular issue with hard water deposits, and so in the spring I'm going to try and pressure wash that off. We have really hard water here, and it's one of the reasons I don't like purchasing black fountains, but I really like how they look because they eventually just turn white or gray because of our hard water. But I still love that kind of aged look it gives. But the one in the front specifically has not had a good pressure wash cleaning since we installed it 3 years ago or so. So in the spring, that's definitely going to be a pressure wash treatment that it's going to get, and hopefully that can knock off some of those deposits that we have, and it'll look a little better going into next year. After the fountain was dried out, I put burlap sacks in there. It was recommended from the fountain company that we purchased our fountains from, because if any water penetrates the cover, there will be a cloth type substance in there to help soak up some of that water over winter. If you don't have burlap, you can use old towels. I've even used old clothes that no longer are any good, and instead of taking them to the Salvation Army, I stuck them in my fountain. I just keep reusing those year over year. This year I did use burlap because we had some burlap from purchasing the fountain in the spring, and I saved all of that knowing we would need it in our fountain close down for fall. I want to finish cleaning up and tidying up all the areas in the garden that I need to. There's honestly not much left to do. It's a lot of just organizing all of the containers that I have left over and recycling those. It'll take a little bit to get those out to the side of the road. I need to go through and decide which ones I need to keep, which will probably be a lot of the 4-inch containers. And then I will keep some of the larger containers, but not a whole lot, because I don't intend to be overwintering or potting up a ton of stuff, especially as how much that I planted this year. And so we need to get those into recycling so they can be recycled. So thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you learned a little bit about preparing your evergreens for winter if you live in a zone where dieback is an issue, and also just about storing dahlias if you've never stored them before. The great resource is The Impatient Gardener on YouTube. She is a great, excellent dahlia grower, and she is very successful. She is based in Wisconsin, so she also has a shorter season, shorter than my season, and she typically pots hers up in the spring to get them going a little quicker. So if you've never checked her out, go check out her channel, and you can learn way more about dahlias than I'll be able to teach you, because I've only been growing them for a couple years, and I haven't been terribly successful yet, but I haven't given up. That's the important thing about gardening. So thank you guys for joining me today, and remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care, everyone. Until next time, bye.